Now, how often is your accountant talking to you about whether or not you should take out a business loan? Well, this might be more stuff that your accountant isn't telling you. So, we are going to talk about that on today's show. Some of the pros, the cons, and some of the things you want to keep in mind if you're thinking about taking out a loan for your business. So, stay tuned for today's episode. Welcome back to the show, and I want to bring on our co-host Lola. Welcome back to the show. How are you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. It's been a rough week, but I'm happy to be back, and I'm happy to be back with another episode of Stuff Your Accountant Isn't Telling You. Have you been?
Yes, I am good. I'm good. Well, exciting. I just got home today. Was in Atlanta teaching a finance workshop for law firm owners, and I mean, it was great because many of the business owners that were in the room, they're running anywhere from a $1 million to $8 million business, and we really got to dive in a bit deeper to talk about, some of the things that they need to think about when it comes down to understanding the finance side of their business. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that was very consistent is we found out that there's a lot of really good information that their accountants aren't telling them, to the point that some of the people in the room were just like, you know what, after this workshop, I realized I need to fire my bookkeeper and my accountant. I was like, oh, okay.
I feel bad for those accountants and bookkeepers, but and I think that's one of the reasons why we do the show, right? Is to provide that level of clarity to business owners because I always say, like, your business, this is your baby. This is I think I was listening to like a Gary Vee episode where he was talking about like your business is kind of like another kid. So it's like if you think about it and you're thinking about like what you're trying to do and the decisions you're trying to make that are in the best interest of your business, like it's important to have the right financial advice to be able to do those things. So,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, because I think about it. Now, I will say some days I like the analogy of your business being your kid, and there are other days where I don't like it.
why?
Um, I mean, because when you think about your kid is there's a different relationship. Like you'll, for the most part, I mean, to a certain extent, you'll never really cut your kid off. You won't be like, hey, this kid is gonna make it, so hey, it's off with this is we're filing for bankruptcy and getting rid of you. I mean, but you can't do that for. I mean, you can't do it for a business, and in some cases, I think you do have to make that decision to say, hey, you know what, this business is not cutting it. Like, hey, the profit margin, this business isn't making us enough money, so we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
shut down shop and we're gonna be done with it. Like, you don't really go to your kids and be like, this kid isn't getting straight A's. We're gonna shut this down and be done with it.
I'm not getting a good return on my investment. It's time to end this relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
So,
I don't know.
so that's why
I
sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely has its pros and cons, and I'm sure we'll learn about both when we have children of our own. But yeah, definitely always interesting when people do that comparison.
Yeah. But one of the things that I do think that is very, very important, I think when you think about that is, what really when it comes down to, let's say if it came down to your child, like would you take if your child got sick or something, would you go to some random person in the street and say, hey, this person has a white jacket on, maybe they're a doctor, let me ask them to diagnose my child or whatever? You would be
Are you
foolish to
are
do
you I
that.
just wanted to make sure like you're not asking me this question because I was like the first problem and the first mistake that you made is you said your child. I'm like, I'm not having a child with anybody else. It should be ours. But I
No,
think
I'm not. I'm not.
I recognize it
No,
was a general question to the audience, so I understand now.
yeah, it is a general question, and and I say that because
Yeah.
most people, when it comes down to whether it's their child or people, won't even do that with their pets. I mean, whereas
Right.
you will go seek qualified advice to get help with your pet or help with your child, even with your car. You're not picking
Mhm.
some random person off the street or some random person you saw do a YouTube video, change a tire on a YouTube video. But that's what I feel like people are doing when it comes down to their bookkeeper, their
Mm.
accountant, their CFO, some random person that they have not checked any credentials for. They have no way to know whether this person is legit or whether this person is good. And they're going to this person, they're paying them, and they're saying, hey, what should I do in this area of my business? And they're either getting bad advice or the person doesn't know. So they get no advice in that area. And I'm just like, you wouldn't do this with any other valuable asset. So why are you doing this with your business?
That's a really good analogy. I've actually never thought about that comparison about taking something valuable like your business and, like for example, you gave the example of your child or, your pet, like you would never take it to someone who you didn't feel like who you questioned for any moment was not qualified and was not the best person for this. I think honestly, from my perspective, I think the challenge oftentimes is twofold. I think one, people don't really have an understanding and a sense of the importance that finances and having a solid finance partner plays in your business until it's too late. I think that's one thing. And then I think also, I think it's just a lack of understanding and I think realizing how they're able to really validate, like, is this person a good fit for my business? So like, for example, if we use the example you gave, Terrell, of like taking your vehicle, right? So like I'm really big on reviews. I read reviews about like places where I take my car. I ask questions, just to make sure like it's a good fit. So if I'm getting positive reviews, then I'm making sure that, hey, this is somewhere that is legitimate. And then after that, I'm taking my car there because I feel a little bit more comfortable because other people can attest to the experiences that they've had. And I think you almost have to do the same thing when it comes to finding that right financial help. And I think this one almost needs like a different episode. And I know we have a checklist, but like, what are just some key indicators that you think like business owners should be looking for when it comes to just assessing that?
I mean, I think the first one is going to be is does the person actually understand, finance and accounting? I mean, if you're going to
Mm,
ask them finance and accounting questions, you want to make sure that they understand. And to be honest with you, in some cases, you want to make sure they understand more than you do, especially if finance and
yeah.
accounting if that isn't your area. You want to make sure that they know more than you know about the
Hmm.
subject matter. And
Hmm.
some of the times you can find that out by checking to see, do they, create content on social media? What do they have on their website? Are they creating blogs? Are they creating videos? What do they post on, on their website? What do they post on their social media pages? Like, just see, like, can you find an example of them displaying, or I guess you would say them, exemplifying their area of knowledge or area of expertise? Because I will say is similar to like when you're looking for a restaurant, a lot of
Hmm.
times it can be a great restaurant. But if you look at that restaurant and you don't see any pictures and you don't
That's
see
true.
any reviews, you're
That's
just kind
true.
of like, nah,
This
I'm
is a
not
little
gonna
too
take
sketchy.
yeah, I'm not
Right.
gonna take the risk.
Right.
And it could
Exactly. And you don't
be
know. Hmm.
it could be the best restaurant ever, but if you don't see any evidence of what they can do or any examples of what they can do, then you're
Hmm.
more than likely going to be like, okay, move on. So I think that's one. It's just, do they have stuff out there? I think then two is, can they explain things in a way that you understand? And I think
Mm,
you start to figure that out if you have a conversation. I tell anybody, if you're going to hire an accountant, if you're going to hire a bookkeeper, make sure you have a conversation with them. Do recognize you are hiring someone to do something. It's not like you're just buying a product. I mean, and in many cases, let's say if you were buying clothes, most people do go through the process of actually trying on the clothes before they take
yeah.
them home.
Yeah.
Unless, like I said, you're familiar with the brand, you already, you're familiar with what size you wear, you bought
Hmm.
something similar like that before. But if it's your very first time buying, from that brand or that store, you may take the time to try it on. And I think a lot of people are hiring a bookkeeper or an accountant, and they're not even having a conversation with that person to see, let me test, do they know what they're talking about? Do they know what they're
Yeah.
doing? And can they explain it in a way that makes sense to me? because that's a big thing. Because if they can't explain it in a way that you understand it, then they
Mhm.
may be a good bookkeeper, they may be a great accountant, they may be a great CFO. They just may not be the great bookkeeper, accountant, and CFO for you.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking was the point that you made about just going back to the importance of treating your business like you would treat anything that's important, your child, your pet, like your car, like an important asset. But I think like honestly, the financial part of your business is kind of like another level and another layer, right, of your business cuz you can help some you can have someone market your business, you can have someone do like other services in your business, but really sharing your financial state, the financial state of your business requires another level and an extra layer of trust because this person is kind of getting visibility into how your business is doing. And I think that is an area that a lot of people are sensitive about because like if their business may not be doing that well, or if their business may be challenged in certain areas, they really need someone that they can trust. So I think that conversation ahead of time really helps you kind of get comfortable with this person to really understand like, are they genuinely interested in helping you advance and grow your business? And are they trustworthy enough where you don't have to worry about your information being used or elsewhere, or whatever, or them sharing things that are private where your business is concerned financially?
Yeah. And I would also say this is, you may not do like a depending on how big your business is, you may not do a full blown background check where you get their social security number, run it, but at a minimum, do a Google search.
Yeah.
Because I have
Yeah.
seen some people hire someone, they really don't know the person. They're like, oh, I heard about this person, and they hired someone. And then later on, and you having a conversation, like for example, someone was talking to they were going through this coaching program, and they were like, yeah, they were running their business, and they said, yeah, we hired someone to help us out kind of on the bookkeeping, the billing and stuff. And they said, wanted to help this person out, give them a good job opportunity. And so they hired them. And so the coach asked, like, oh, okay, how did you find them? They told him like, oh, this person, they talked about how they found them. Like, oh, okay, now this person was actually a client of theirs at some point. It's like, okay, what was the person a client for? And they said, oh, a criminal defense case, I defended them in an embezzlement case. It's like, wait, what? You
Oh
hired
my
a
god.
person who was on trial for embezzlement to be like your the person who handles money in your business? Like, yeah, don't do that. like
Oh
it's
gosh.
like it's
Maybe the lawyer felt like this person was not found guilty and they were innocent. So they felt like,
um
this person was good to hire.
one of the things that I will say is we work with a lot of law firms. So I'll say this is, if you're a criminal defense lawyer, you know stuff about your client that the other
That's
party doesn't know because it's
yeah,
protected under client attorney privilege.
right.
Now, you may know some stuff, if you defended this person in an embezzlement trial, then there may be some stuff about them that should
Mhm.
be like, okay, all right, this might be red flags. Because I mean, there was another situation where someone had like they had hired this person to do something similar to do like billing, invoicing, kind of administrative stuff that interacted with the money in their business. And they hired this person. This person was an ex-con that they wanted to give, a second chance to. And so the question we ask is, okay, what did the person, go to prison for? Oh, they served 10 years for embezzlement. And it's just like, that might not be the right position to have that person in. And so that's why I always say it's like, depending on the size of your business, you may do a full blown background check if you have a
Yeah,
really big business. But if you have a smaller business, maybe just do a Google search on the person
right.
that you're hiring and just see whatever pops up. How do you feel about it? I mean, because you got to trust this person to be able to give you good advice. and
Mhm.
and if you see, like, for example, if you're hiring a CPA, if you do a Google search on the CPA, oftentimes you can find out, have they had any complaints,
Filed against them.
against
Yeah.
them
Yep.
by the state CPA society.
Yep.
And that's a really good thing to know. Or, hey, do they have any really disgruntled customers who left bad reviews? Go
Mm-hmm.
look and see, what was the review? What did they say about them? And because I do think that is very important if you're going to pick, the right person. And then I do think also is, as you do kind of your homework on them, and this is something I think is very important, is, do they have experience in the type of, issues or type of things that come up that you need help with? Like, for example, in line with, what we're the topic for today was about, should you take a business loan? Like, we've had
Mm-hmm.
several clients that have gone down that route where they've either applied for a loan, or they've taken out a loan, or they're considering it. So we have experience of dealing with that topic. Like, and
Right.
there are some things that we've understood where there are pros, there are cons. And then we also understand, like, hey, what are some of the things you should consider if you decide to move forward with it? And what you want to know is, does that person have any experience or exposure to that? So I do want to talk a little bit more about that, because, whether or not you should take a business loan was a topic we've talked about in the Money Mastery program. And so I'm not going to, like, regurgitate everything that we talked about in the Money Mastery program. But a couple of the things that we talked about was, just kind of like, the first thing is really asking yourself is, do you actually need the loan?
Mm.
So when you start thinking about that, what are some of the first things that come to mind when I say that, Lola?
I think the first thing is, I go back to this. This is something I've been saying, that I've said in the group, and it's something that I continue to say is, are you borrowing to grow, and are you borrowing to sustain, or are you borrowing to sustain, right? That's always my question when people are like, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting this loan, like why?" Right? And I think there's two main things, right? Like, it's like, hey, I'm borrowing because I'm trying to grow my business, or I'm borrowing because, hey, I need to keep my business afloat, right? And I think people just need to understand that, like, borrowing to keep your business afloat, it's not a permanent fix for whatever it is that you're dealing with. So you need to kind of really understand and dig into what the drivers are. But I would say those are kind of the two things I would divide it into. Hey, you're borrowing to grow, you're borrowing to sustain. I think when you understand the why, then you can kind of move to the next step. So that's how I see it. How about you?
Yeah. And I would totally agree, because I mean, that's the first place that I start with them is, like I said, asking, the client, why do you need to take out a loan? And
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes some of the answers may be is, well, I feel like cash is low, and it would make me feel better if we had a little bit more of a cushion. I'm like,
Right.
okay, there is no bad reason. I'm glad we
Mm-hmm.
got the honest reason out on the table. And so
Right.
once we do that, then we can ask further questions, like, okay, all right, well, what is the level of cash that you feel comfortable with?
Mm.
And, is there another way to get the bank balance back up to that level? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, are there any other alternatives other than taking out a loan? Because one of the cons of taking out a loan is that you're going to have interest expense.
Right.
So there's going to be interest that needs to be paid on this loan. Like, that's a new expense that you didn't have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, you're going to have to actually pay back the principal on this loan. So that's more cash going out the door that you weren't previously paying. So I think your point is spot on about asking yourself, like, are you doing this to sustain your business where it is, or are you doing this to actually grow to the next level?
Yeah, and I think the third point, honestly, I would think about another one based on what you just said, is sometimes it's more of a comfort thing. Like, I don't really need it to sustain my business, but I know, like, some conversations, like one client was, some of the questions I've heard is like, hey, like, if I think about, like, for example, the PPP loan, just as an example, or any other grant program, where, hey, there was a period where there was, if you have a period where you don't have any interest, or it's like 12 months or 24 months interest free or whatever, where people are like, hey, can I take this loan out just to keep it in case I needed to do something with my business? PPP is probably not a good example because there had to be specific stuff tied to that. But sometimes you have like, line of credits or different stuff that are offered as incentives to like business owners or small business owners during in a certain range of income. And sometimes people are like, hey, I just want to take that so that I know that I have that, right? As a backup in case something happens. So I think that's like a third reason. And I think that's fair. And like you said, even when you gave the example of, hey, cash is my bank account, balance isn't really kind of where I want it
Mhm.
to be. I think once you get and understand that, then you can say, okay, what do we need to do differently? But I think that's also one that I've seen, especially now with, the recession coming, like people wanting to have a bit of a buffer to help navigate some of the unexpected situations.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that tell people is, you know, even if you want to do this for your comfort, like, what is the price tag on,
Hmm.
that decision? Like,
Yeah,
how much is your comfort costing you financially?
that's good.
Because
Yep.
if you're taking out a loan, then it's just like, okay, all right, what is the payment going to look like? What's the interest going to look like? And we can kind of calculate, like, hey, you're going to have to pay back an extra X amount of dollars. Is that worth your comfort? Like,
Yep.
is it really worth it for you to be comfortable, or do we just need to dig in and do something a little different?
Yep.
And so,
And
and I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that question precisely, the question you asked is that payback amount of what this comfort is costing you, or just even if you're taking it to grow your business or just to sustain your business because you're running into cash flow issues, are you comfortable with that number? Because I think a lot of people, a lot of business owners aren't going into that decision with that in mind. And so when they get to the other side of the transaction, then they're like, man, like I just can't manage these expenses. And I think part of that is something that the accountant, especially if you're paying them at that level, should be helping provide that clarity on, hey, this is what, if you take this loan, this is what the numbers are going to look like. And then as a business owner, you making the decision to see, are you comfortable with that number? I think that's an important question to ask.
Yes, I mean, because I
Hmm.
think that brings us to, like, a second, like, major point is really, what's your game plan on paying this loan back?
Right.
Because I think at that point it becomes a little bit of a numbers game of
Yep.
however much money. Let's say if your loan payment is going to be, let's say, $800 a month is going to be the
Hmm.
payment. That's the principal and the interest. So the question then is, okay, based on where your business is today, can you afford to pay out an extra $800 a month? And the question is, if the answer to that question is no, then it is, well, what are you going to do to
Right.
grow your business enough to be able to make that $800 a month payment? Because if you
Hmm.
don't make this payment, like, this isn't going to go well.
Right. And it just starts a snowball effect, right? Because then you can't pay, the interest continues to compound, which puts pressure on your business. I mean, it's just not, it's definitely something that you want to avoid. So I think that's critical. And I do agree that it becomes a numbers game. And I think that really is, for me, that's how I kind of see the role of your financial guide is to help desensitize that feeling of like, man, like I just feel like I really need this. But then to ask you kind of the tough questions to say, okay, like, is it just that maybe you need to kind of, hey, increase your clients by X to help drive this and to
Mhm.
fill the gap, or are you going to go get the loan? Like, which one is easier? So I think it really helps to, it takes the feeling out of it when you bring the numbers into the discussion, because then you can, you have the information that you need, then you can make a decision and say, okay, hey, we're going to do this, or no, we're going to wait, or hey, we're not going to do this at all.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that sometimes that can be a little tough, because
Hmm.
this is where I often have conversations with the client to say, okay, all right, if you didn't have this loan as an option, what would you do? Like, let's take this off the table and let's say the loan wasn't even available to you. What would be your game plan to solve this problem that you're dealing with? And a lot of times, as we start to talk about it that way, and they'll tell me, like, well, what we would do is we would need to bring in two more clients, or we would have to put a hold on, hiring these new people, and we would have to change this. And then I would ask them, okay, all right, you're saying that those things are a possibility. That's what you would do if you didn't have access to this loan. So why aren't we just doing those things instead of going and getting the loan?
Right.
And like I said, it may be that, hey, well, we don't have the confidence that we can actually close those, get those two new customers that quickly. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. That makes sense. But I do think the what you do have to do is you have to go through those tough, challenging questions so that you know that you're getting to a good quality answer as opposed to just going with the first thing that made you feel comfortable.
Yeah, and you know what, I was just thinking about this as you were talking. I think actually, as an accountant, I think because we're so close to how our client's business is doing financially, it's kind of hard for them to BS us, right? So when I think about it like that, I think about it like you are one of the very few people in the circle of the business owner that can really hold them accountable. I mean, because you're saying, "Hey, I'm taking the feelings out of it. This is what the numbers look like. This is where your business is." And so I think like my advice to any business owner would be if you're going to have anybody hold your business, hold you accountable to hit some of the metrics that you have financially, it should be your accountant. Now, of course, it varies, right? Because for some people, you're not really paying them to do that. Like that's not what the expectation is. But if that person is like your financial guide, then you should be paying and you're paying them. Then the conversation should be, hey, this is what the metrics are. This is what we've committed to. And I think, like you said, having that conversation, like even feeling comfortable, like you said, to even ask the question of like, hey, if you didn't have this loan, like what would you do? I think that requires a level of accountability that I don't think a lot of business owners have outside of that, in my view, outside of that relationship with your accountant, because I'm giving you nothing but numbers and the numbers don't lie. So like you can't BS me. You can't say, hey, I just feel like, we can do this. And I think it really helps to have that person as a business owner where you can bounce those ideas off of. Because if you still go and decide you want to do this, even after, the facts that are given, at least you know that you have the information that you needed to make that decision.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, because there were some of our clients that have asked about, taking out a business loan, doing something like that. And one of the things that I've told them is like, hey, based on your numbers, what I would say is what we have to do is we have to get revenue up. Because if you're taking out a loan because you're feeling a cash crunch,
Hmm.
um, either if there's some outstanding accounts receivable, let's go after that. Let's contact the client, get them to pay their invoices because it may just be, hey, that since we haven't reached out, they haven't paid some of their invoices.
Right.
So let's make sure we have a process on that. And then there's also looking at, okay, all right, well, if we take this loan out, what is our realistic marketing or sales strategy to get new customers into the
To convert.
business? Like,
Right.
and not like, hey, well, we're gonna bring on two new customers. No, no, no. Like, let's get very honest. What are you actually doing today that's going to help you bring those two new customers in? And how serious are you about that? Because the moment you borrow this money from the financial institution, maybe you get 1 month's grace, but your
Right.
clock is going to start about when you need to start paying them back that money.
Yeah, and they're very generous when they're giving you the money, right? Like financial institutions are very generous when they're giving you the money, when they're like, hey, like, in terms of like, I guess once you get approved, it's like, hey, what do you need? Of course, depending on the loan, right? It's like, hey, take whatever you want. But when it comes time to pay that loan back, it's like clockwork. It's like immediately, it's like, hey, we're going to collect our money. So I think it's just having that information is important to really help make sure that you're making the right decision. So no, I definitely agree.
Yeah, I mean, and it becomes so true because, I do think another major point is to really consider other sources of income, like,
Mm,
or other sources of cash. One
yeah.
of the most obvious ones is like, hey, the owner can put more cash into the business.
Hmm.
Or another one is, like I said, you can actually just go collect on the outstanding invoices that you have with different customers. And I think a third one is you can actually just go hustle. Like go earn the money. I mean, you whatever it is, whatever business you have is, especially if you're doing a professional service, you can find other people to just come up with something creative that you can do. Like for example, if you're an accounting firm,
Mhm.
maybe you do some accounting cleanup work for some small businesses who don't have an accountant. And you can charge, let's say, $750 to go do an accounting cleanup project. Like it's not that you're taking them on as a new client, you're doing an accounting project, you're helping them get their accounting records up to date. But in the process of that, you're making some faster money than your normal service because you are trying to fill a I guess I would call it a money vacuum. You have a gap. You need X amount of dollars. What are you willing to go, I would say, legally hustle to go do to fill that gap?
You felt like you had to put that out there, like, "This is only legal activity."
Yeah, because when I said the word hustle, I was like, you know what? Some people might take that the wrong way. I don't want you
Fair.
going to jail because I don't want you saying, well, Terrell Turner said that I just need to go hustle by any means necessary. So I went out and I did something. Now it got me sent to jail, and I'm just like, yeah, no, no, no. Like, if your only option is borrow the money or do something to get me sent to jail, I'm like,
Borrow the money.
borrow the money and stay out of jail would probably be the option I would lean to. But let's
Mm.
just make sure that we do have a strategy for like serious growth in your business.
Yeah.
Because like I said, when it's time for you to pay that loan back, you want to make sure that you've increased your revenue or your cash inflow. You've increased that to be higher than the actual loan payment.
Yeah, and I think, when it comes to borrowing money to sustain your business, I think borrowing should be the absolute last resort. That is my view. I think, like, all the cash alternatives that you mentioned of, hey, trying to think creatively about how you can generate, extra revenue to help fill the vacuum, collecting on anything that's outstanding from your clients that you've done work for. All of those should be explored before you actually go collect the loan, because the challenge with borrowing to sustain your business is, if your business isn't growing right now and your business is having challenges and you really haven't taken the time to identify what the drivers of those challenges are financially, then borrowing the money is only going to help buy you more time, but it's not going to help fix your problem, right? So I think that's important, because you really need to you need to change how you're doing business if your business is not growing or your business is not profitable. Let's just say your business is not running itself financially, like you're needing to go put money back into it, then that's an indication that you have a problem on your strategy, or hey, you need to think about how you're going about running your business. So I would say, from my perspective, I think borrowing money should be the last resort, because it puts more financial strain on the business. Like, it's like, hey, you already have your business and your livelihood on the hook here, at risk. Now you're going to bring another person into the mix, or another company into the mix, to add an even more burden to the business, which you just don't need.
Mhm.
And as difficult as it may be in the moment, trust me, it is probably better for you to try to figure out how to fix the core problem, than for you to, from my view, right, than for you to go put a band-aid on it, and in 6 months you're basically in the same, actually you're not even in the same position, you're worse off, because now you owe a bank money, and you owe this interest, and you're now having to pay this back, and your business is in the exact same spot that it was in when you took out this loan. So
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that is so true. I mean, and I think part of it, maybe one way to sum that up is just really asking yourself is, can you afford to take this loan? I
yep.
mean, it's just like, will the cash that you realistically expect to come in, will it be large enough to cover your regular expenses and now also cover this additional loan that you're taking on? Because if
Yep.
you don't have the money to do it, I will say, I mean, as a small business owner or as a big business, owner, you're not like a Federal Reserve Bank or government entity where you have the ability to just print money. Like you don't.
Mhm.
There's a
Right.
there's a limited amount of financial resources that you have to work with.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you start trying to operate outside of that limit, you're gonna run into some issues pretty quickly. And I will say
Agree.
is I've seen some people get into that habit where they borrowed money to cover the cost for something, and then they use the credit card, and then they took out another loan to pay off that loan, and it's
The
just
vicious
like
cycle.
it just keeps this vicious cycle that keeps recycling over and over. Now, if you're doing it to get a lower interest rate, like there's a reason behind it. But if you're just
Right.
doing it because you're like, hey, you know what, I don't know where the money's going to come from, I think that's where you really do have to take a step back. And I love, like I said, some of the questions that we're getting in the Money Mastery group.
Yep.
And I guess for those that are listening, you may hear us refer to the Money Mastery group. It's a private group for small business owners who are really where we're diving a bit deeper into some questions that they have about managing the money and the financial side of their business. So if you're
Yep.
interested in that, just leave a comment and leave us a comment, or you can email us, visit our website on the Business Talk Library, and you can contact us there. But one of the things that that the people in the group are really looking at is like, okay, all right, I've assessed my need.
Mhm.
Now, I've also recognized, hey, how much money do I really need? Like, because I'm not just going to go for the money just because the bank is offering it, but how much money do I really need? And then really looking at what are my alternatives? Like, are
Mhm.
there new products that I could offer? Is there some type of, like, I was talking to a marketing company before, and they were like, hey, our sales pipeline is down a little bit. And I was like, well, can go create Google My Business pages for other businesses? Like
Mm.
that's a very important thing for a lot of businesses, that when you type your business name on Google, you want something to pop up. Could you go and charge, few $100s, 750 to $1,000 or more? Could you charge that to go build a Google My Business profile for other clients? Like,
Mhm.
what could you do to get scrappy to solve that problem? Or is there a new course that you can create?
Mhm.
Or if it gets really bad, like, is there something that you can sell or something?
Yeah.
Like, is there something you own that you can sell? It's like, how can you get really scrappy about solving that problem? And then what's your go forward plan? How do we make
Right.
sure you don't end up in this situation again?
Mm. Yeah, no, that's good. And I think those were really good like discussion points in the group. But I think also when it comes down to it, I think that was a really good summary, Terrell. I think if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, cool, like my accountant isn't helping me with this, like I'm not getting this insight. What do I need to take and go back to my accountant, right? So some of the questions that we kind of shared with the people in the group were the following. Like I'm just gonna pick like a couple. Like one, you need to go back and ask your accountant, like, okay, can I afford to get a loan? That's the basic question, right? Like we walked through some of the things that we've assessed with our clients, right? We've asked them, hey, like, or we've done the analysis and gone back to them and said, hey, this is what your numbers look like. Yes or no, you can or cannot afford to take a loan. And that's I think the basic one. And I would say, Terrell, the second one that I would think of is just the point that you made, right? Of like, okay, now that you've taken the loan, if you do decide that it's in the best interest of your business to do that, like how can you actually go through of making up the revenue to make sure that that interest payment, when it's time for you to pay back that loan and the interest, that you have enough money to cover that? What are some other questions that you've thinking from the group, like that people can go back and kind of ask their accountants?
Yeah, I mean, asking is, what are the payment terms options?
Hmm.
Because there are a lot of people that I've seen that have gone and gotten a loan, and what they didn't ask is what the payment terms. They didn't know that it was going to be a weekly repayment plan. They didn't know that they were
Mm,
going to have to pay the loan back on a weekly basis. And so
Yeah.
I do think you want to ask, hey, well, what are the payment terms, or what are my options on the payment terms?
Yeah.
And then I do think a very important one is, what is my current cash burn rate? Like, how much cash am I burning through currently? And then that will help give you an idea on your cash burn rate. Tells me how much cash you need to make sure that you have coming in your business or coming through your business to be able to cover all the expenses that you have. And then I think the last question would be is, hey, are there any suggestions on areas that I could reduce expenses? Because if your
Mhm.
bookkeeper is doing their job, they're looking at
Yeah.
your numbers constantly, and
Right.
they may see a vendor, or they may see a type of expense that's coming out, where they can come back to you and say, hey, here's my recommendation. If we are going to take this loan out and we need to pay this money back, maybe we can cut back on these expenses for now, or maybe we can delay hiring that new person so we
Yep.
can pay the loan back. So your accountant should be able to provide you with some insight to say, hey, here are some expenses I would consider cutting back on so we can afford that loan.
No, that's good. That's good because I think that kind of goes into the process that we were talking about, right? Is that person to hold you accountable to say these are all of the 15 things we can do first before we take the loan, assuming we're trying to take this loan to sustain the business, right? And I think an area that we didn't really dive into was the area of borrowing to grow, right? And I think a good thing to that we would recommend that we've shared with the Money Mastery group is the course that we did on how to get a bank loan. So if you are looking to say, okay, I'm actually looking at this money as an investment, I'm trying to acquire, expand and open a new store, I'm trying to launch and scale my business, and you have an actual set up plan and a strategy, then I'd highly recommend that course of how to get a bank loan. And Terrell walks you through step by step of like, these are some of the things that they look for. These are how your financials should be, and your accountant should be helping you kind of get ready for that discussion to put you in a better position to be eligible for that.
Yeah, that one was it was a really good course, because there were a couple people that had asked about, like, hey, well, how do I get a bank loan? And in
Hmm.
that we talked about the banker's business model. And for that, I had interviewed some business bankers. I talked to several business bankers, and I was just like, hey, give me the inside story. What do you really care about as a bank? Like,
Yeah.
what's gonna make you say yes, or, well, what's going to lead you to say yes or no? And so I talk about in there the banker's business model. I talk about what does the bank really care about, and then I ask, what are the things that you don't care about that you see a lot of business owners doing?
Mm,
And they gave me some ideas, like, hey, there's a lot of business owners who walk in the door with this type of information or these type of files, and to be honest with you, Terrell, I don't care about those things at all. So I talk about that in the course as well.
yeah.
But like I said, I mean, for the people in, the people who've heard about this in the money mastery, I think some of this stuff, some of the feedback that they've given is that, hey, this really helped me think better about, getting a loan from a bank, or if I want to go that route. And if I decide to go that route, like, how I probably should start months beforehand of
Hmm.
really preparing myself. And in some cases, depending on the size of the loan that you want to take out, you might want to start working on some things and getting some things in place with your business, like a year and a half before you actually need the money, because the bank is going to look at some things over time, and there's some critical things they want to look for. So I think that one is a great resource for people. It's a great course and a great resource for people who are trying to understand, like, hey, should I get a bank loan? Because I think it'll shine a light on some things that they really need to know. So I will say thank you guys so much for tuning in to another great episode this week, where we're talking about something that, maybe your accountant isn't telling you about. Maybe it's something that your accountant isn't having this conversation with you about whether or not you should take out a bank loan. What are some of the pros? What are some of the cons? And what are some of the things you can do to put yourself in a better position so you can make a smart money decision? Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.
Hey, it's your girl Tia Robertson. I'm the host of Entrepreneur Insider. Right here on RETV every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern for entrepreneurs and news that you need to know about. See you there.
Welcome to What's Going On? My name is Demita Joe. Each Wednesday, you can find me here at 3 p.m. I'll be over here discussing different things that are going on and try to bring you a boost of positivity for your week because we all need this. We're going to share some feel-good stories. We might find a hometown hero. We may take a look at some trending topic. And sometimes we might even find a lesson in a not-so-warm and fuzzy story if we can. I'm Demita Joe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode right here on What's Going On?